I used to look forward to getting the mail. Our family sort of 10:30 in the morning, the mail's supposed to be here, and you go through, and if you see if there's any kind of promotional stuff or things for the business, oh, there might be a letter from somebody, and then you thought, oh, and if there wasn't a letter, oh, I got to wait another 24 hours. Now, flash forward to my 39-year-old son. He doesn't even take the mail out of his mailbox. It's not, I have to say, hey, I sent you a card. You might want to check your mailbox.
Oh, yeah. I hear that a lot.
I mean, it's just a different way of thinking for I don't know what age that group would be, but mail doesn't have the same kind of resonance that it did in my day.
What's the thing about mail? Because I have been very active in a greeting card business for 11 years. And the thing is, nobody does it. Only 3% of business owners send greeting cards. So people don't look for that in their mail. And when it does get there, it's a surprise and a delight. Welcome to Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast for micropreneurs building genuine, lasting relationships with clients, colleagues, and community. I'm your host, Kandas Rodarte, and today I'm joined by Kevin O'Connor. Kevin is the author of 2 Floors Above Grief. His career spans over 50 years as a writer, teacher, principal, curriculum designer, and university instructor. He has authored content and provided training in mathematics instruction, principal leadership, support for substitute teachers, LGBTQ advocacy, sexual health, family life, self-publishing, and marketing. He sings and performs in theaters. He is active with Smart Ride, a bicycling group that raises funds for HIV awareness, treatment, and education. He resides in Fort Lauderdale with his husband, Leon. Their blended family includes 5 sons and 7 granddaughters. Whew. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Kandas, so good to be here. Thanks. I appreciate your energy with your introduction. That was wonderful.
You have so much going on, but I want to hear your story. Tell us your story. How'd you get to where you are today?
Whoa, I'm 73. So let's see. I'll try
to keep it under 7 minutes.
Yeah. So I prepped a little, not a lot, because you said we're going to keep it casual. So I saw that question. I thought, well, I'll go with it. I've been asked this question before, but I guess a little bit. I'll start with something I start with in the book, is that presumably I was conceived in an apartment above a funeral home. I didn't have that conversation with my parents to verify that, but since that was where they were living at the time, I have to presume that perhaps that's where I came to be. So to the idea of me coming to be in a place above a funeral home where people are making their exit, I was making my conceptual entrance, I guess, into life. So, and then through my life of 73 years, I had a great home life. And that's part of what I talk about in the book it was a wonderful home life, a wonderful growing up experience in a smaller sized town with supportive family and friends. And then I went off to college and had a fortunate to spend 1 year at a campus in Rome, Italy, which was one of my bigger growth experiences. Throughout my life, I've peppered it with many, some relationships. I've fallen in love a number of times. I've been married 3 times. And I've had two children who are now in their late 30s and 40s. So, and in the midst of all that, I was an educator, like you said, loved being an educator, got into that just through people I knew. Even though I majored in political science in college because I thought I was going to be president of the United States, I used those skills and put them into education and have loved it. I've gotten to do a lot of different things in 3 different states, and I retired for the second. I retired in Illinois as a principal in 2007, but then I retired again in 2020 from probably what I consider my last professional education position. So I retired from there. So I've had a chance to do a lot of different things, and it was making that second retirement in the midst of COVID. I think all of our lives, we can say in the midst of COVID or with COVID, this is before COVID, this is after COVID. It's amazing what those years of life have done to the way I think a little bit and the way I put my life into different cycles. Anyway, that's what gave me the opportunity to sort of congeal some of these experiences that I put together in a few minutes here into the book. And the book pretty much focuses on those experiences that I had growing up, being the son and nephew of an undertaker, living in a funeral home experience, how that has influenced me. I had through all these different careers and relationships, I had this book in my head, and even though I've written a lot in education, I said I got to write a book. I want to write a book. Even I remember walking along a beach in 1993 with some college friends. What do you want to do next, Kev? Not next. We were young and raised in families. What do you want to do? What's your dream? I said, I really want to write a book. And so that was 1993. And I didn't know what it was. But then I was fortunate enough, which I explain in the book, to through all those years, especially from the years 66 to 74 or so, did a lot of letter writing between people in my family and myself, mostly my parents and my aunt and uncle. Those letters were all saved. And through different, either I saved things, letters I received from not only my parents, but friends and things, or my parents saved all the letters. And when I was in those last years of professional work, I had all these folders and shoeboxes and things of letters. And I thought, what am I going to do with these things? And so then I treasured them because I would, if I'd go through a memorabilia box, I would read one. Oh, that's good. I'll put it back in the envelope and put it away. But then I probably around about 10 years ago, I decided to organize the letters, and I laid them out on a floor. I thought, what am I going to do? The teacher in me, the sequencer, I taught kindergarten at one point. Let's put these in order. I'll put them order by sequence. And so I did it by date, and I just put all the letters and date and spread them all out. And then I thought, now what am I going to do? I don't want to put holes in these pieces of paper. I'm going to buy plastic sleeves. So I went to the one of the office stores and bought boxes of plastic sleeves. I ended up with 700 pages of saved authentic letter writing memorabilia. And then I took it upon myself to start to read those things in sequence. And I thought, wow, I knew these people that wrote the letters, but then I started to see their characters and because now I was looking sort of backwards in a retrospective way. I started to see who they were and what they were about, and reading their real words, their authentic words, not something that I was making up in my writing head, but it was their words. And I thought, what do I do now? So I thought, I think I have this is the book I want to write. This is the book that I think that can get me started and launch me in. I had written a dissertation for university, but this is something I wanted to do from a more personal sense. I wanted this book to be a gift to my family and others. And so I started writing. I took classes about honing my writing skills. That was so helpful to get somebody to guide you. And started doing that in May of 21. I started to do that process, and that evolved into a lot of writing and just writing and writing and writing. I was taught to write until you don't think you have anything else to say. And I used those letters as sort of the foundation for the book, not sort of the foundation of the book, to help me launch into stories. And I decided as I was writing that this wasn't going to be a memoir that was told in sequence. I was born in 1950. It's more thematic. And so it sort of weaves around different themes that were happening to me and how those themes connected to me for what I did later in my life. So that's how I put the book together. Then it was I guess I love your word micropreneur, because I hadn't, until I heard that from you and just a couple of other people, very few people use it. I thought, well, that's what I am now. I'm a micropreneur, because now in the world of self-publishing, which is how I decided to publish the book, I'm a micropreneur, and I have to remind myself, I'm also a business owner. As an educator in public schools, I was not a business owner. I certainly did a job like a business owner, but was not a business owner. But now I am a micropreneur. And I think one of the things, as you might have mentioned in the intro of me, one of the things I'm getting to the point now where I can help other people as I go through the process is, how do you market a book self-published? How do you get that out there? How do you put myself out there? What do I invent? I've got a pretty creative mind, but with the help of people like our friend Noemi, or a colleague of mine that has helped a lot in my self-publishing process. Her name's Polly Litovsky, and she has an organization called My Word Publishing. She guides me and others through the whole process to self-publish. She teaches it as she goes, and her staff. So through her team right now, I'm doing the audio version of the book, and that's a whole nother learning. I'm not recording it, but getting people to audition and listening to the auditions, and the theater side of me helps in that way to from the acting standpoint and also the directing standpoint. How do I work with a narrator who's reading my story? So that's been interesting. So the whole, back to the micropreneur, there's so many aspects to this. And in my I don't think at 73 my brain is deteriorating. I think it's still keeping pretty active, because this focus of writing and publishing and meeting people and marketing the book and planning events and getting fired up, and more so about social media. By the way, I loved the broadcast you had the other day with, who was the person that's a LinkedIn expert? I have it in my notes. Anyway, I enjoy listening to her and her ideas about how to do LinkedIn. Donna. So
Donna Sadula.
Sadula. Thank you very much. So I'm just wrote to her and said, I'm just letting everything you said sort of seep in here. When I tell a story,
did you reach out to her from the podcast episode?
So far, I haven't heard back. I just went to her website and said, I heard you on Kandas's show. I do stuff with LinkedIn, but there's so much potential there that I think I need to have that potential re-explained to me sometimes, or just presented from another person's point of view. I've been fortunate to know people who are pretty adept at it and have been teaching me more things.
I think it's pretty phenomenal that you did that, because a lot of people will just, they'll listen to podcasts and they'll never take action. And I'm all about inspired action. I want people to take action. And if you learn something from one of my guests, holy moly, please connect with them.
Oh, yeah, that's what I did. And
I interrupted your story, but there's so many questions that I have. I think we can.
No, but I just, you gave me I probably have 7 minutes, but this is the way I talk. And I try to, ever take the Myers-Briggs test? You ever done that before?
I don't like those kinds of tests.
Okay. Well, I don't crave them, but just one of the things that the Myers-Briggs taught me when I was a school principal, we did it with our staff just to help how we work together. It was very helpful in that sense. But it came back to me that when I talk or when I'm thinking, I jump from place to place very quickly and go, and that's the one of the icons of the square I was in that Myers-Briggs grid was a bird, because I could be in the middle of a sentence. Oh, a bird flew by. I have to talk. I have to think about that bird. So that's, I think maybe that's sort of come across in this.
You and I communicate geometrically. With tangents.
So. Oh yeah, tangents, and people will help me sometimes. Okay, let's come back. Well,
okay. So I have so many questions. Mm-hmm. First of all, just to clarify your book, you have actually taken letters from people that you personally knew and wove them into a story about yourself.
Yeah. And here's 2 floors above. I got to get in the 2 floors above the grief, and it's about our 2 families. That this is the house we lived in. This was actually the house we lived in Elgin, beautiful. Illinois. And it's my uncle bought this house 10 years after he was in the business in this town. And then he bought this house because the business was growing, and it was suffering from depression woes in 1938 and needed some TLC and somebody to live there. And he took it and he put the first floor into, made the first floor, he and my dad, into the funeral home. The second floor was the apartment that he and his wife lived with their three daughters. The third floor, which in the original house was a ballroom with two stages, was the apartment that my parents converted, the area, the space that my parents converted into their living space. But the thing about a lot of funeral home owners live near the funeral home. I think it's maybe less so nowadays with the convenience of communications. But when funeral homes first became more in vogue is the word I'm prevalent. Thank you. Yeah. When funerals started coming out of people's homes and they wanted a place to have their house, that was in the late 20s, 30s when that started to happen in our country. It wasn't unusual for the owner to live close by or live in the apartment attached or above. But what separates us this was two families. So it's two floors and the subtitle's two families, because we lived together in those two apartments. And when I say together, even though each apartment was self-contained, more or less, and had their own kitchen, their own facilities, those kind of things, in order for me to get to my third floor apartment, I had to walk through their apartment to get to the stairway to lead to what was the ballroom in the original house, our apartment. So, and that stairway was right across a few steps away from the entrance to my aunt and uncle's kitchen. There was always activities in that kitchen, and their kitchen was at the top of the landing of the stairs that came from the first floor. So any kind of traffic coming through there sort of congregated into that area. So I was essentially raised not only by my mom and dad biologically, but by my aunt and uncle, who treated me as their son, along with their three daughters, and their daughters were older than me. One of them was 19 years older than me, the oldest one. So there was quite a spread in our ages, but we always were raised as brothers and sisters. We knew we were cousins, but we called each other sis and brother. So
I think that's the way that families existed before the 60s, the 1960s.
Yeah.
My father was raised by an uncle and aunt. I mean, he spent his school years with his mother or his father. He lived with his father, and then in the summers he would spend it with his aunt and uncle. And really, when I look back at my childhood, the two people in my life who are most like my grandparents would be his aunt and uncle. They were the most grandparently to me. And I even named my daughter after my dad's aunt. So, but but something happened. I think it had to do with suburbs that we are, in America, I think we're going back there because generational families are starting up again, where you have children and grandparents in the same house now.
Another pandemic thing. I think not only pre-pandemic,
I think that happened before the pandemic.
But I think it's economic too.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's wonderful.
Not at all.
I never really had a relationship with my mom's mother because she lives so far away. And, I barely knew my father's mother and my father's stepmother and his dad. I mean, later in my life, when I became an adult, I moved closer to where my grandfather and his wife lived. And my grandpa would come and take me to lunch when I worked. I worked in Berkeley and he lived in Richmond and Berkeley in California. They border each other.
I went to UC Berkeley.
You went to so you know where Richmond is. So my grandpa would come and pick me up from work in Berkeley, and we would go to lunch.
Nice.
So, but I mean, that was when I was in my 20s. But when I was a kid, I didn't know him. I didn't know him well until I was an adult. So, and you miss out on stuff when you don't have family like that.
No, I hear you. My even though my dad wasn't from this town of Elgin, he moved there as a teenager with my uncle, and my uncle came to start the funeral home. My mom and her family were from this town. So my mom really spent most of her 93 years in the relatively the same 10-block radius of where she was born and raised. So to have that kind of grandparent and aunt and uncle and cousin type atmosphere, and my mom could look out our kitchen window and look down the couple blocks down to see where different houses that she had lived in her youth and in her marriages and in her one marriage, in her marriage. So, I mean, she could have that view right from her kitchen window. So, I mean, when I think about those kind of things, and when people are in and out of each other's houses, and that's an element that I like to recreate as much as I can for people that are younger than me.
So does your family still own the funeral parlor?
Good question. Thanks for asking. No, they sold it in 1984. I tell that little story a little bit. The funeral home is still in existence. My uncle brought it to Elgin. In 1930 with his new bride, about a few days after they got married. He wanted to be an undertaker and own his own place. He lived in Hammond, Indiana. That's where they were married. And he said, there's this opportunity in this town called Elgin, Illinois. This is before freeways, before expressways, before easy ways to get to places. And we're moving there. He didn't know a soul. And he and his wife, when you talk about entrepreneurs or micropreneurs, they went into an area where they really had to establish themselves and gain the trust of people who would come to them with their family business. So that whole thing about relationships, which is one of the themes of your show, there's a bit in the book that talks about how my uncle did his early marketing as a late 20-something-year-old, and how he did that, and how he made a mark in this town in just a few years. And then within 10 years, the funeral business was outgrowing the funeral business and his family, because he had 3 kids in those years, how it was outgrowing the house they were renting, and how he had to find the house that's on the book cover. So it just what was your question?
Question was if the funeral parlor was still in operation, or
still
in your family.
So so we sold. The family sold in 84, and it's gone through a few different owners, but it still has the last name. It's now called Leetz, Leetz, Leetz O'Connor Funeral Home, same location. So the O'Connor name has been part of the funeral home vernacular business in this town of Elgin for 93 years now. So wow. It's even though we haven't owned in over 84 in over 40 years, almost 40 years, it's still very much a business, and it's stood the test of time. The name.
Wow.
Yeah.
And are the new owners living in the home?
Yeah, they've those owners. Yeah, they do. They live in the same areas where we live. There's only
because I keep thinking about a ballroom for a funeral.
Well, excuse me. Yeah, they could maybe convert. No, I believe, and I haven't been in the house in many years, but they've taken those second and third floors and made them into their own living spaces, much differently than we did, because there was 10 of us, sometimes 11 when my aunt's mother lived with us too, multi-generational. There was, 11 of us. The current owners are 2. I think they have some kids too. The current owners are adult children.
Yeah.
It's just the 2 of them. So it's a different style, I'm sure.
So let's go back to this micropreneur thing. 100 years ago, it was very common for a family to have a business.
Mm-hmm.
My great grandmother owned a little grocery store. Another great grandmother owned part of a saloon. The women in my family have always been business owners. My grandmother owned a business. So my mom's mother owned a business. So the women in my family have always been entrepreneurs for generations. So it was just a normal thing that you would own a business up until, I don't know, Ford and factories. Then people went to work in factories and cities became a thing. I mean, before the 1930s, there weren't a lot of cities.
Mm-hmm.
Not
like we know them today.
Like we know them today. So it's just a different. Your brother wasn't doing anything that other people weren't doing. And honestly, back then people moved a lot for opportunity.
Yeah.
How do you get from the East Coast to the West Coast within two generations? 10 states at a time.
Yeah. That's part of your family journey.
So I want to talk about because genealogy is one of my favorite topics. And you offer a service where you teach people how to take their letters and turn them into these stories. So talk to me about that and what that looks
Sure.
like.
Yeah, it's just I'm launching that service. I had an opportunity to give a presentation on a cruise that my family and I went on in May, and it convinced the cruise line that this would be a presentation I could give, and they agreed. So yeah, I'm only speaking from how I did it, but I think there's a richness there as I've presented the book at different settings. People say, "Hey, I got all these letters. I've always wondered what to do with those letters," and so I just earlier I talked about how I chose to put them in sequence and put them in sleeves, and I got 4-inch wide notebooks that I keep them in. They're in the closet behind me, or this way, this way, closet behind me. But anyway, so I'm launching a thing where I could teach that till to say I'll start with Rotary clubs or adult communities or libraries, things that I could make that presentation to share what I learned, and and not to say that everybody has to take the letters and write a book, but I think there's a lot of legacy in those letters that somehow get kept in shoeboxes or file folders, or, oh, what am I going to do with these? And I think, and maybe it's some people's tendency is at some point, oh, I got to get rid of these, but let's figure out a
Yeah,
way.
I actually started purging recently 10 years worth of greeting cards that I've been saving. At some point you've got to do something with them.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And I had to make, although I don't, as these things collected, I haven't purged any of the things that have ended up in the folders, or when I put stuff in the folders, I didn't throw anything away. I've got
Well, you're archiving
notes.
them.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And that's the other thing that I've been approached a couple now by one of my a couple of my universities that I went to. Have you thought about archiving these things in our archive? I said, I haven't thought about that, but my kids,
writing
my kid,
letters,
yeah.
writing letters is something people don't do anymore.
Oh,
And I
yes.
mean, I have a folder on my hard drive where I have saved, my mother passed away 10 years ago. I have a folder on my hard drive where I've saved all her emails, but her emails
Mhm.
aren't letters in her own handwriting. I also have a box full of Christmas wrapping packaging and Christmas stuff. And there's a bag where my mom wrote my daughter's name on the bag. So every Christmas when I open the box, I get to see my mom's handwriting. And that means something to me.
Yes, it does. It does.
You know,
It
and that's
does.
about what I got, right? Another time I got a note. I found a note that she had handwritten that said something very inspirational. I need to find it again because I was like, I opened it and that's my mom's handwriting. I was like, wow, that's not something my mom would normally say, but she probably sent it to me just when I needed it. You know?
Well, and you bring that up, and one of the things since I just the book recently, if you follow Amazon at all, and when you have a book on Amazon, you can look to see how your book is doing. And so last week it was named number 9 in the rankings for teen and young adult readers. I thought, wow, that was something I wasn't expecting. I'm grateful for it for sure. But I
Do you
think one of
think that somebody used it for like a book club or something?
I don't know. And there's a whole system in publishing where you can look for keywords and things like that. And I think that must have been one of the categories I chose to be counted in terms of Amazon. But it wasn't until I looked last week that I realized, hey, there's some potential here. My micropreneur, there's some potential here that I have to maybe work on, because in the book I talk about the difference between email, the difference between communication nowadays compared to when I was growing up. And I love that you said that you've taken it upon yourself to archive your mom's emails. I don't think there's a lot of people that do that. But that's one of the things I bring out in the book is, people tended to save letters and cards, but do we save emails? Where do those emails go?
Yeah.
And yet those emails are like our letters. So what I was in the book, what I try to explain to the younger people is, hey, look, I used to look forward to getting the mail. Our family sort of 10:30 in the morning, the mail is supposed to be here, and you go through, and if you see if there's any kind of promotional stuff or things for the business. Oh, there might be a letter from somebody. And then you thought, oh, and if there wasn't a letter, oh, I got to wait another 24 hours. Now, flash forward to my 39-year-old son. He doesn't even take the mail out of his mailbox. It's not, I have to say, hey, I sent you a card. You might want to check your mailbox.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I hear that a
I mean,
lot.
it's just a different way of thinking for I don't know what age that group would be, but mail doesn't have the same kind of resonance that it did in my day.
What's the thing about mail? Because I have been very active in a greeting card business for 11 years. And the thing is, nobody does it. Only 3% of business owners send greeting cards. So people don't look for that in their mail. And when it does get there, it's a surprise and a delight.
Mm-hmm.
But 97% of businesses would never even consider sending that kind of literature in the mail, that kind of mail. They would never consider sending a greeting card. So people have been trained that all they get in their email, in their mailbox, their physical mailbox, is junk advertisements and bills.
Yeah. And I made a resolution in January, which I haven't followed through on. Based on what I learned through my own experiences, I thought, I think I set myself up probably for too high a goal for me, which was, okay, every day I'm going to send a note to somebody and put a stamp on it. And I did pretty good for the first.
That's a very high aspiration. It's
not
easy.
And
it's not easy.
And I got through January okay because I didn't, anybody that I sent a Christmas card to or holiday card to, I didn't send it till January. So okay, if I average those out, I did send something out at every day in January. But I thought, but like you said, it's not only for the sender, it's for the receiver. Sometimes when I do take it upon myself to send a handwritten thank you note and put it in the mail, people thank me for the thank you note because can't remember the last time I got a handwritten thank you note.
Or they post it to social media and look what I got in the mail.
Yeah. It's that important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I still love walking into a post office and buying stamps and seeing what they have available and knowing when I mail a book to somebody, it's still a magic thing to me.
Are you doing your own delivery for your book?
No, but
okay.
No.
Oh, it's on Amazon. Duh.
But sometimes people will want to copy the book, and I buy what's called author copies,
and they want you to autograph it with
or something like that. Or sometimes when a person's on one of the review services, they'll want to have the book to read. So, but it's still, whether it's something I send like the book or even a letter or any kind of a document. It's still fascinating to me when I think about when it actually gets received or when I get something in the mail, that how many hands that went through or how many machines nowadays it went through.
We strayed We strayed so far away from my question.
Yeah, you said
it was about genealogy. I want we have limited time. So I could ask you a gazillion questions and we could go down a gazillion rabbit holes, but I want to talk to you about the hard questions because you have written textbooks. You've been a principal, you've been a teacher. You told me that you taught kindergarten, you've taught at the college level. And today in the year 2023, there are kids ages 6 to 26 that are in the education system that have questions that are hard to answer. So I would like you to address how you answer those questions at a very high level. We don't have to get into nitty gritty. Did I just stump you?
No, not at all. I'm just thinking of my experiences. Well, one of the questions when I was working in the Broward County school system, one of my jobs was outreach and advocacy for LGBT students and families and teachers. And when I would present my story to high school kids, oftentimes the question would come, why did you wait till you were 55 to come out? And when I first got asked that question, I thought, wow, I heard the voice of that kid. A couple things went through my mind. It's more comfortable for kids right now even to be asking that question. Much more comfortable. It's still stressful. It's still challenging. It's still health threatening for kids to make those kind of decisions I have to say probably less so than it was when I was a kid. So what I explain to kids is that I go back and say, I was born in 1950. Well, then they'll also ask, well, when did you first think that you might have had an attraction to men or that you were gay? I said, well, first of all, we didn't have a word for it in the 50s and 60s. So that question that comes up from a kid it gives me an opportunity to paint some history. And I think one of the ways kids figure that out, get from it, is how they stand on the shoulders of people like myself and people, not just me, but the people that are probably my age that came out at a much younger age than I did. And I also say to kids, well, as an educator at that time, I was just starting teaching in the mid 70s when the whole thing was going on in the Bay Area with Harvey Milk and he had Anita Bryant down here in Florida, and then we had Harvey Milk in San Francisco, and all that the threats and the stress on people who wanted to pursue teaching and yet had an inkling or they knew they were gay. So I was coming up into the early days of my teaching career with that in mind. So as I explained to these high school kids, I wanted to be a teacher. I admired the people that were out front there at that time, but I took a different role. I wanted my job not to be threatened to me. Probably I was a little selfish perspective at the time. But I also say to the kids, I knew I wanted to be a parent. I knew I wanted to be a father. At that time, I wasn't aware of it. And there weren't that many places you could go to or even think about how does a gay man be a father. So I took the gayness that I had inside me and just put it down here in my lower levels. And I lower levels meaning my chest, not lower than that. But I'm a relationship person, so I always, like I said in my intro, I've fallen in love sometimes and had enjoyed that and had some wonderful relationships and did get married and had a good relationship for most of that marriage and had kids. And so going back to the questions I get asked as an educator, that was one that comes to mind. Just and something that's more in tune with what's happening now. And I think it's a question that's still out there. I still do some youth advocacy work, and
I think the answer is that you just tell the truth.
Thank you. And you have to be authentic. And that was something prior to my coming out and prior to me going through that process in my early 50s. That was something I couldn't tell the truth about.
Yeah.
And I knew it was there, and I had the therapists and I had people that worked with me and I had understanding spouses. But it was something that I just couldn't be, like you said, authentic about. Now it's such a feeling of freedom and a feeling of being my whole self and talking about it. Just I touch upon it just a little bit in the book when because the book more or less doesn't deal with it's not a book about me coming out. So I didn't put that, but I made reference to how my life has changed in these later years. But I just think it's there's so much place that we can keep educating people. I like being in front of kids or adults or weaving this story that I'm telling you into the context of the book, because there's still parts of me as a kid growing up in that funeral home when I thought, what is this thing I have? What is this thing
and you may have thought something was wrong with you.
Oh yeah. And so you put it deeper and deeper and deeper into your psyche that way. Yeah.
There are people today who think that there are more gay people, more trans people, more people with sexual dysphoria, more people, on the Q spectrum. They just think that there are more people today and I actually had someone tell me that they thought it was because of soy milk.
Oh boy.
That soy milk was making men gay. Anyway, people think that there's more, but that's not the truth. The reality is that there have always been spinsters who never got married. Well, why do you think they didn't get married, y'all? It wasn't because they didn't want a husband. It was because they didn't want a husband. right?
Mhm.
you know, and it's just something that's been around for thousands of years. I mean,
Mhm.
Alexander the Great was one of the greatest leaders of all time. He is documented as being someone who enjoyed the company of men, right? It's been around forever. It's not that there's more, it's that people feel more comfortable
Yes.
claiming their
Yes.
truth today than they did before. And for the people who don't feel comfortable with people claiming their truth, they're the ones that have the problem. And I don't normally get political, but I just did.
Yeah, you did. And part of it, and then part of this whole issue has become more political in the last, let's say 10 years.
Yeah.
And to the point where it's boiling right now, boiling for sure. And I have to believe that it's the discussions that we have and the conversations that we're having like today, right now, that keeps a lid on the heat of this a little bit. Because and although we could talk to her blue in the face as some people to explain about Alexander the Great, or
Yeah.
yeah, and to say that what we've learned about the the etchings on caves and
Yeah.
things like that from
Yeah.
thousands of years ago. But this is all part of our society, a part of who we are. But it's just very tenuous. So yeah, I mean, there's another. It wasn't until the last 10 years of my educational career that I thought that I could be able to speak more about this. And when I was in my teacher and principal years, when people would make remarks about people who they thought were gay or homosexual, I just sort of would nod or go along with it, and probably in some cases defend the person, but also didn't get as much into it as I do now. And I'm so glad to have lived this long to be able to embrace that part of myself and be authentically who I am with my family and friends. If you'd asked me 30 years ago if this would have ever been possible, I wouldn't have even known how to answer.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
All right, let's shift gears again. So you've got this book out. How are you marketing it? What's your favorite way to market your book?
Okay, great question. My favorite way, I'd have to say, is getting in front of people and giving presentations and creating those opportunities. Sometimes some of the presentations have been by invitation, which is great. But I find when I read this different posts by self-published authors, my book isn't selling. I don't know what to do, and I think, and I don't want to do the kind of work. I don't want to. I'm
That it
not
doesn't.
good at social
You could be an
media.
author. You could be a network marketer. You
Yeah.
could
Thank you.
open any
Anything.
kind of business. You could even own a coffee shop. No one's coming into me through the big
Yeah,
coffee.
that's right. So Candace, you got that. You nailed it. It doesn't matter what you're selling or what you're advocating or what you're promoting. You have to be in front of people to do it. And you can be in front of media people with social media, which I think I'm getting a lot better at. I was pretty comfortable in the first place, but now I'm just creating spaces to meet. So to take it for example, I'm doing things lately that are called lunch and laugh, or sip and sign, or so I've got things scheduled at different places where people, and sometimes people will come. Maybe I'll be the only one sitting at the table. But just the idea of me getting that event onto social media showcases the book. Or if I'm talking about, organizing letters or whatever it is, it's out there. My husband and I happen to be going to New York next week and to visit some family, go to some plays. And I thought, hey, I got an opportunity to do a sip and sign. Where am I going to go? So I threw a couple people. They said, well, there's a at the Hot Ticks booth in Lincoln Center, there's a cafe. It's open to the public. Just go and sit at the table. So I put an Eventbrite together and I posted on social media the last couple of days that I'll be at the Ticket Center at Lincoln Center having the New York launch of my book. So I built it up a little bit. So I get responses from people. Lincoln Center, holy cow, you're in the Lincoln Center. And I didn't intend it that way, but I just needed a location I could have picked a Panera book, Panera or Starbucks or something, but I just wanted a place that people could gather. And if they wanted to bring their book that they've already purchased and sign it, or if I'll have copies available if they want to buy it. But I just had to laugh that to some people it appeared that I was invited by Lincoln Center. I'll take that. That's fine. But I think you ask what's my favorite way to market, and is putting myself out in front of people and creating a space.
Yeah.
And if so, now what I'm doing, any trip we have coming up, I'm going to a wedding in St. Louis Labor Day weekend. I'll probably find a coffee shop that I'll put something out there. And if I get one or two people to come and engage, fine. The other thing is that people that read it on social media will say, now he's in St. Louis.
This is a brilliant way to market.
And the other thing I learned from a workshop I took a few weeks ago was this guy, which I've been doing, and I have no way to trace what's happening with it. When you're going through an airport and you're going to the book, you're looking at the bookstore, just take a copy of your book and put it on a shelf. And it's got a barcode at the back. So if a person happens to be engaged in your book and they take it to the register, it'll register for the price. I mean, the person at the register might say, "Where'd this book come from?" Or the distributor of the books in the bookstore might say, "I don't know where that's come from." But anyway,
that is the most genius guerrilla marketing I have ever heard. So because the barcode is in the system, so they can sell it. They'll figure out a way. But the thing is, the way that you track that is if the bookstore reorders.
Well, that's true, and I have to learn ways out of it. But my point is, my further point is, hey, I've got 4 or 5 trips in these 6-8 months. I'll just leave a book. It's like Johnny Appleseed leaving the seeds along the trail.
Is that a true story? You're a teacher. Is that true? Did he really plant apples?
No, it wasn't. No. Okay. It's a fable. It's a fable, but it's a fun story to tell.
It is a fun story. But it's about the planting of the seeds, which is what you're doing with the books.
Yeah. So if you find, whether it's getting in front of people through podcasts like this, or going in front of people at a presentation, or when we were going on this cruise in May, we had planned that. I thought, hey, I'm going to figure out a way to make this worthwhile. So I not only had the presentation, but I have postcards printed up that talk about the book.
You
I don't have
also made your cruise a tax deductible expense.
Yeah, thank you. And so, but then I would sit at the pool area and I would set up a little, and sometimes I find, and I'm not promoting this as the way to do it, but sometimes I ask forgiveness instead of permission. So if I was sitting out on the pool area on the cruise, I would set up a little display of the book and a sign that said, "Want to know more?" I would watch the people and I go over and then I go up and talk to them. When I walk to these, a little tangent here, when I go to street fairs or market things or conventions, and a person is just sitting behind the table with whatever their wear is, and they're just sitting there and there's nobody there, I thought, that doesn't make much sense. They expect people to come to them. And when you're at a convention with 600 other displays, what's going to make you stand out? Yeah. Well, what I've learned through work and education and being in those situations, you get in front of the table, you shake people's hand, you say, "Hi, how are you? What, hey, like your hat," whatever it is. And
getting in front of the table is the number one biggest piece of advice for anybody who's doing any kind of selling at an event where there's a table. Stand in front of it, not behind it.
Right. And be the greeter, be the welcomer, be the, maybe when I'm in my 80s, I'll be that greeter at some store. But I mean, it's just, I'm not shy about being in front of people. I like that part. I thrive on that part. And if I was to sit, and the people that, when I go to the conferences about self-publishing and how to market your book, and people say, "Well, nobody's reading my book." And the presenter will say, "What have you done to tell people about your book?" "Oh, I don't know. I wrote the book and I thought if I put it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, people would just come." And then the presenter will say, "Do you know there's 4 million books published a year? Half of those are self-published."
Yeah.
People just don't. People browse in bookstores, but you're one book among 4 million.
Yeah. You have got to promote.
You've got to promote. And so,
got to promote.
while you have to promote, while at the same time, for me, I can't get discouraged by the volume of those numbers,
Yeah.
And
Well, dude, I think one of the most valuable pieces of advice I've ever heard from a guest on my podcast is put your book on the shelf of a bookstore and just leave it there.
Yeah, just leave it there. Do you realize? And I've done it in other stores, or I mentioned these postcards. If I don't have the book with me, but I have postcards in my pocket, and I'll go to that section of the bookstore that has #1 bestsellers, I'll just stick a few postcards in there, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, what's this? So and I've been told that compared to other people that have had the book out for 8 months, my book is selling much better than
you hit
much
number
better.
9 for teens.
There we go. So I'm approaching. I'm over 1,000 copies sold right now.
Yeah.
Most self-published books, I'm gonna do a little self-promoting here.
Yeah.
Most self-published books only sell about 300 copies in their lifetime.
Wow.
So I think
that hurts my heart.
Yeah. So but I think that speaks to the idea, if you're gonna write a book and be proud of it, because again, I think it's a very low percentage of people that really want to write books actually get them published. You gotta wear that mantle and say, wow, I did it. But then you have to say, I got to get this book in front of people. I got to get it in people's hands.
Yeah.
And
you have to actually want to write it too.
Well, yeah, you have to.
The number of people who have told me that I need to write a book, it's like, no, because most self-published authors get 300 books sold. I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't like writing enough for that to be a reality for me.
No, and this is your creative outlet. This is what you're doing. You have
I have put out hundreds of hours of video and audio content and interviews, and I've recorded over 200 podcast episodes between my 2 podcasts. I've put out plenty of content in the world to absorb, and I think some of it has been pretty damn good. Like, leave a copy of your book in a bookstore, y'all.
Oh, now I'll keep running into authors and airports, self-published authors in airports.
But your book is very different than anybody else's book.
Every book is different than the next one.
But I've never heard the premise of your story before. I grew up in a funeral home, and here's my story. That's pretty amazing. All right, this is your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
Oh boy. Well, people. Grateful for people, because I wouldn't be here without people. Biologically, emotionally, psychologically. Present day, I'm most grateful for my husband Leon, because he has supported me in any journey I take, whether when I was making the decision to join him in Florida when we first got together 17 years ago, or whether it was establishing our own home together in different locations around South Florida, whether it was working in my education field and supporting me as a full-time employee and working there. And then in this journey of the last 2 years, being an author, he has helped me keep my discipline, because you talked about writing and doing your shows, what it takes, the discipline it takes to put these things together, and you have to carve that time out. I'm also diabetic. So how does that fit in with Leon? Well, he's the one who says, hey, I think your sugar's getting low. You better eat something, or take a break, get out of that room, the room I'm sitting in right now, take a break. So that's people that I give gratitude. And then I do a lot of meditation work, and that's a theme that is in the meditation work, to be gracious and have gratitude. And I thank the people that helped me put this book together, meaning the people that were part of the stories, whether it was my aunt and uncle, my mom and dad, my 2 brothers, my 3 cousins, and their extended families, our offspring. I'm grateful to the offspring, who now number in the high hundreds of grandchildren, great-grand. And when I put this thing out on social media yesterday about being in New York at Lincoln Center, I had cousins write me and say, I'll be there, who live in the New York area. So it's just another area, another way to get together with the people to whom I'm grateful for who helped create these stories and be a part of these stories. And that was really initially who I wrote the book for, was the offspring of the house, because I wanted them, the offspring of the house, the offspring of my parents and aunt and uncle. I wanted those people to know what it was that made them come to be, and how these people in the 1920s and 30s made some decisions that made it possible for you to eventually be here. And that goes back to your other thing we talked about with genealogy and just tracing roots and helping. The genealogy pages I'm grateful for the research and grateful for the people that are doing that kind of work. I love finding your roots on PBS, that TV show, and just knowing that there are people that are really into the nitty gritty, trying to find out these mysteries and tracing. But then those, when you get your tree on ancestry.com or 23andMe or whatever, those are just names in a little box. They don't tell the story. I think it's up to us and that are still living to try to find those stories to give that box more of a meaning. And so I'm grateful for the advent of computer science and other kinds of things that are making it possible for us to understand more about from where we came from. I think that's wonderful. That's not those things are on my gratitude list. So people, mostly people, a little bit of technology, but mostly people too.
Thanks for tuning in to Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast for micropreneurs building genuine, lasting relationships with clients, colleagues, and community. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on Audible, iTunes, Good Pods, or your preferred podcast player. Our theme music is track 14 by Rev Brock and Soul Lily. Make sure to visit gratitudegeek.com for the show notes, where you can find links to all the groovy resources we've mentioned, including ways to connect with our guest, author Kevin O'Connor. Stay groovy, my friends.
Stay groovy, my friends. Stay groovy.